Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, why the 46.5 win total that was released today for the Suns sets the stage for a bounce-back season. Up here, if not, hopefully, on the court as well. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Brendon Kleen, your host, and a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons. Welcome in. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to kick off your Wednesday. The Olympics can't come soon enough. The offseason rolls on. Thank you for being here. Hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. We're free and available everywhere, including YouTube. Hit that button. A new episode pops in your feed every single Monday through Friday. All you got to do is hit a little button. I got to put episodes out, and I will. Get locked on to the Phoenix Suns all offseason and into the 2024-25 season, which we are starting to look at already today. Become an everydayer. Get locked onto the Suns every day. All right, let's go. Today's episode, looking at the Vegas win totals. The FanDuel Sportsbook, our lovely partners here on the Locked On Podcast Network, have released theirs. 46.5 is the total. It's all looking like an us against them. Us against the world. Chip on your shoulder. Whatever your favorite phrase might be, the Suns are shaping up to be in that mode this year. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. As a reminder, last year, depending on the book you looked at, 50.5 or 51.5 was the Suns over-under for regular season wins this time last year. As a reminder as well, the Suns won 49 games last year. I understand it can be easy to forget that, and I like to remind myself and all of you of it when possible. Because the vibes, they did not have a 49-win vibe season, but the standings don't lie. They won 49 games. They got the 6th seed. And that's even with throwing away, frankly, a ton of games. You know, it should have been even better than that. But 49's not bad. They did, of course, hit the under just slightly with that 50.5 or 51.5 number. But they should have won 51 games, according to their point differential. And that would have cleared the over in some cases. So now we're stuck here, heading into another season with roughly the same roster, and of course the conference around it, the league around it, you probably would have to say got a little better. You know, another year of development from some of the young standout stars in the league. Some of the best teams got even better. But they've dropped 4 to 5 wins, and they're sitting on FanDuel at 46.5. And if you just were to Google some of this stuff, you're going to see a lot of articles already popping up as this, with the Suns as a best bet. All right? Sometimes you get odds that are minus 122. The Suns are minus 110. In some places, you'll see the over-under total win totals be at minus 100, which indicates even more action. But the Suns are going to, I think, course correct here. But the fact that it started at this point is interesting, right? The finished product of the rotation that ended last season, which means Bradley Beal healthy, the young guys basically all banished outside of Bol, Royce O'Neal in. That group was good. That group was on a 50-plus win pace. We've gone through the numbers a bunch of how, you know, the big 3 plus Grayson, the big 3 plus Grayson plus Nurk, that the numbers are off the charts. They're even deeper this year, and yet here they are, dropping. And I just don't think that the league got better enough. You know, the Oklahoma City Thunder got a bunch better. Did the Wolves? Did the Nuggets? Did the Mavs? Maybe you could make a case for any of those teams outside of Denver getting better. And I might agree. But enough for the Suns to drop? The Lakers didn't do much. The Warriors lost one of their better players. Maybe they bump up a bit, but not by much. The Kings got DeMar DeRozan. Maybe that helps in the regular season. I just don't see it. The bottom of the West, about the same. Yeah, the Rockets and the Spurs will get a year better with development. We still don't know if the Jazz might tear this whole thing down, right? So it is hard to make a case that the Suns should drop that much. And I think their line, similar to how they did not win 49 games from a vibe standpoint, those same vibes are informing this line, I do think. And so I would pick the over if you ask me right now. Couldn't they win 47 games in the Western Conference? Absolutely. Absolutely they can. Let me tell you who won 47 games in the Western Conference last year, or thereabout. The Lakers, the Kings, and the Warriors. Are the Suns this year better than last year's Lakers, Kings, and Warriors? How can you not say yes? But of course it's Vegas. That doesn't matter a ton. It's FanDuel's calculations and their, data science people. We're seeing early action. Maybe that line moves a bit. But these lines don't tend to move a ton. That's kind of the point. They're locked in. You bet them. You see what happens. The odds could move. But the real reason it matters is what it tells us about the Suns. One is that they're underrated. They're overlooked. We've been talking a lot about how they didn't make many moves. Right? And so you combine all of it. They're kind of under the radar. They didn't make any splashy moves. Matt Ishbia, Kevin Durant, everybody's been sort of just status quo. We want to see what this looks like. We hired a new coach. We believe with more chemistry and better health and better cohesion, we can be better. We're not going to overreact to a sweep in the playoffs. But that all kind of does still matter when it comes to how these players are going to view themselves and the level of determination that they're going to have. Last year, the wind just came right out of their sails immediately. Beal gets hurt. Book gets hurt. The young guys don't look good. The coach situation never really gels. And the fight wasn't there. I'm not saying that the over-under line is going to, inspire this team to go fight harder than they did last year. But I do think that it is absolutely a possibility that the combination of all of this stuff, once we get closer to the season, there will be preview content and predictions and everything else, and from a media standpoint, that will only add to it. It's human nature. It does feel different to be underestimated and having to prove yourself versus being thought of as one of the championship favorites, this hot shot, newly assembled big three, and just cruising off of that. Of course it matters. And it's not just this stuff. I'm sure this team is feeling that way based on how last year ended. Young team, unproven team with Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns, and of course a young Anthony Edwards who's brash and talking you-know-what all the time. Of course it's going to motivate you to come back and answer that. So to me, this is just one more data point, one more narrative, one more chapter of the story that's been written about the Suns for a while now, and I do think they will show up ready to respond to that. How long does that last? What does that ultimately mean? I don't know. But for now, I can tell you, they're way deeper, way more cohesive, and ideally, you'd hope, a little healthier, and they should hit this over. Next up, I've been going back and looking through the offseason bit by bit here as the weeks go on, and one thing I think is absolutely undisputable is that the Suns in the minimum market hardly missed on anybody. We can look around the league at what happened and why I say that coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by the Game Time app, the best place to buy a ticket for any event. Also, the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, making tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app even go down the closer you get to first pitch. They all are all about transparency and saving you money. They know what sucks about the other ticketing apps, and they want to fix it. So, upfront pricing, a bunch of deals, last-minute deals, flash deals, zone deals. But what I love most is that you have the view from your seat, a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you can see a visual of what it is you're going to be seeing once you get there. whether that's a concert, a comedy show, theater show, or sports event, you can see that view and you can say yes or no. I like it, I don't. Is there something in my way? Is the angle weird? Am I too high up? And make your decision accordingly. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA when you do to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And we're back. Let's keep it rolling here. I've talked about a few of these things already, but I wanted to go through, right? We had all these expectations of the Suns offseason. They're all in. Matt Ishbia, new owner syndrome. They're coming off of a sweep. The pressure's on. Second apron. All these things. And not a lot happened. So I talked last week about how the trades just weren't there, right? The Nurkic trade, not even just for the Suns, which is obvious, of course. Nurkic is still on the team. But around the league, it was not there. And the best comparison you would make is the Rob Dillingham trade for Minnesota, which the Suns didn't really have a good option to do. Minimum contracts did not really... There were not as many players who took minimums as we expected, and that did not have as much value even as it did last summer. And that is another ingredient to how you have to evaluate the Suns' offseason. I'm not saying digging themselves this hole with the second apron is necessarily the route everybody would have gone. I'm not saying that not making a trade and settling to just count on these minimum players as your only upgrades is necessarily the right way to go. But I'm saying if you look at the fact that they were locked in to this type of player to some degree, they did about as well as they possibly could have. Okay? So I put together a list. I tweeted this out last week. The only players who actually signed minimum deals that I think you could say the Suns actually missed on: DeLon Wright, Taurean Prince in Milwaukee, Sandro Mamukelashvili went back to the Spurs, Lindy Waters, I believe is on the Warriors. I will double check where he ended up. He was a player that I've liked. I've talked about him a bunch. He doesn't really seem like a lot of... Yeah, he is on the Warriors. A lot of teams necessarily see it the same way. And then Xavier Tillman Sr. went back to Boston on a minimum deal. You could also throw Gary Trent in there. However, I don't personally think the Suns needed him. So I'm not going to hold it against them. But that's the list. Okay, and so look, if you think Wright should have been on the team instead of Monte Morris and the Suns should have pushed harder there, maybe you're right. But I think DeLon Wright could close some games for this team, so the role was there. I mean, we kind of talked about this earlier in the week with the on Tuesday's show with the idea of, you know, these other players still on the market that the Suns could theoretically cut a David Roddy for. And I said, well, the Suns either need to be able to offer more money or a bigger role, and right now they can't offer either one. I think DeLon Wright is kind of in that camp. He did take the minimum, but he took it on a team where he's going to play likely a bigger role than he would have in Phoenix. Taurean Prince, I think we all agree that's a miss. Maybe you like Mamukelashvili or Tillman better than Mason Plumlee. Okay. But my point here is it's hard to criticize the Suns signings given the actual possibilities that ended up being there. Heading into the summer, a lot of us thought of certain players as potentially minimum guys. I saved my list when I did the preview of these types of players all the way, in April and May for a reason, so that I could come back and reference it. And you go down some of the names that got significantly more than a minimum. Gary Harris, Kyle Anderson, Kelly Oubre, Chris Dunn, Goga Bitadze. I mentioned, Lindy Waters, Mamu. Trendon Watford went back to Brooklyn. He's probably going to make a bigger salary next year. You look at Jalen Smith, Andre Drummond. All of these players got $4, $5, $6, $7, $8 million. Some of them are still free agents, but we went over that before. So given the constraints and given what the players kind of on the fringe of maybe they're a minimum, maybe they're not, actually got, it's very difficult for me to look at all of that and say that the Suns swung and missed. Monte Morris and Mason Plumlee were their two additions on the minimum market. That's very, very good. You could tell me, if I'm talking on July 23rd next year and reevaluating how it all played out, that the Suns got two of the better, if not two of the best possible free agents who actually took a minimum. I believe in them that much, especially for what the Suns need, which is high floor, high IQ, stable, solid vets. That's what they got. It's somewhat similar to the trade thing I talked about previously as well, in that the league doesn't seem to want to do any favors to teams that are stuck in this second apron situation, right? One, given that they're probably, very, very high pressure, already have a lot of star power, they're adding on the margins and everything else. But also, if you think about it, the players that come to these teams, they really are only going to sign a 1-year deal, because why would you sign a 2-year minimum deal unless you're really, if you're really on your way out of the league, or could be, maybe you do that. The Suns have gone the player option route, as have the Lakers, to encourage it, but mostly they're 1-year deals. And mostly you're probably not going to stick around on that team if you actually have a good season, like Gary Trent. Gary Trent's going to be a Buck for one season, for all intents and purposes, right? He's going to probably start. We would imagine he'll have a good year, and the market will break his way again. So you're not going to direct, if you're an agent, you're not going to direct your client to a team with a lot of those things working against you. Probably a fairly small role, a ton of pressure, and no long-term security. And so what we saw is a lot of players ended up getting a little bit more. Teams that could afford to offer it, offered it. The room exception, the biannual exception, a little piece of cap space. If you're the incumbent team like the Magic with some of their guys, you're going to re-sign your own players for maybe a little bit above market value, or definitely above the minimum, just because you can. I think that will be a trend. I don't think, even if all these second apron teams hope it and pray it to be, I don't think that a lot of these agents and these players are going to see that as an attractive situation. Last year, the Suns got decent value, but they were betting on upside guys, and not a lot of them worked. This year, they were swimming in the same waters as a lot of other capped out teams, and they did not get the best cream of the crop, in part because some of those players took more money, and in part because the Bucks could offer more of a playing situation. That's what we should expect. If the Suns are still in the second apron going into next summer, I promise you, I will learn my lesson. They're not getting the top guys. Next up, a Suns retrospective, a Locked On Suns retrospective, I should say. I listened to an episode from 3.5 years ago for one very specific reason as we head into Team USA. I'll tell you what I learned, and I'll get a little bit honest about that experience and how uncomfortable it truly was. Coming up next. Closing out the show, let's go. All right, listen to an episode from late May 2021 following the 6-game series victory by the Suns in the first round over the Los Angeles Lakers. Why did I do that? Well, there's been a lot of chatter once again for the umpteenth time about LeBron James defying Father Time. He somehow still feels like the most sure thing, best player on Team USA against all odds at age 40. In an Olympics we never figured he would even be on the map to be playing in. And so if you remember, rewinding our heads back to May of 2021, that was when it felt like the end was near for LeBron. He wins the title in 2020, obviously has the injuries the first year in LA, but I think all of us kind of understood he was biding his time. Wins the title the following season, and then the season we're talking about was the one right after that. He has an ankle injury late in the regular season, toughs it out, AD goes down, AD tries to come back, it gets ugly, and LeBron effectively at a certain point in that series waved the white flag. If you watched it, you know it was true. He's being defended in the play-in by Andrew Wiggins, and he did not look like himself. And then he's defended by Mikal in the playoffs, and Mikal, and Jay, but a lot of the times Mikal. And Mikal is not physically forceful enough to defend LeBron. We know that. We saw him. He's best defending guards. I've said it a million times. I'll say it again. And LeBron was missing layups. He was choosing willingly not to drive the ball to the basket, not finishing, not even going up to try to finish, throwing off glass, floaters, everything else. And so I wanted to go back and listen to what I was saying at that moment and what my Lakers guests and other Suns guests were saying when it felt like Father Time was catching up to LeBron. And what I remembered is he chose not to play in the Olympics that year because of the ankle injury. So he actually may have played in 2021 if not for some of the health concerns, which expresses how dire it really was, right? He thought it. Frankly, I mean, look, Book got that last, it was the final 23 jersey that LeBron wore as a Laker, right? And I think a lot of us were like, keep that. That might be the last time he played. Or, we didn't know. It felt that ugly. And my Lakers guest was saying it was just kind of a series from hell from a luck standpoint. And, point taken, that's fair, whatever. But the other funny part of it is just that it couldn't have been further from the truth. LeBron is here still. He did not go away. The following season, he was decent. I think that ended up being the year he played a bunch of center. Season after that, of course, goes to the conference finals, which was last summer. And this year, looks as good as ever, in spurts at the very least. And now he's on Team USA continuing to dominate. So, I think I'll go back and listen to episodes periodically to get a taste for what it felt like at the time of different things. Might have to do a KD trade, listen to some of those episodes now that we're a year and a half out from that, somehow. But the other thing that I thought would be fun is just to go back and listen to myself do a podcast 3 years ago. Honestly, pat on the back to myself. I was less raw than I thought I would be. And frankly, I think a lot of that is because it was still just audio back then. That was basically one of the last few weeks of episodes that I did. As soon as the finals ended, we switched over to YouTube, or actually in the finals. We started doing YouTube episodes when they played the Bucks, of course. And there was something about, I was much more in my element before I had to worry about the camera. My posture could be awful. I'm not going to lie to you guys. There was less clothing involved. We live in Arizona. It's the summer. I'm sorry. And I could just chill. I could have, a drink, coffee, water, whatever, food. It just was more relaxed. It felt like doing radio, and now this feels like I'm doing something in between TV and I don't know. So maybe that's part of it. I was nailing my, we had the same reads that year a bunch. It was like the Michelob Ultra Player of the Week, Moment of the Week. We had like a Snickers thing. We had just been purchased as a company, and we were rolling in some new opportunities, new resources, let's say. I was nailing all of it. But it was also so much, I could hear in my voice how much more enjoyable it was. And I am going to try to, I'm making it a goal this summer because I can't lie to you guys. This upcoming season, I am not really all that excited for. I love watching Devin Booker play. I love watching Kevin Durant play. I love watching Beal play, frankly. I believe this team can be pretty good. I just told you I'm hitting the over on 46 wins. It could be a lot worse. You know what? I could be covering the Hornets or the Pistons or something, the Wizards. But it's just been such a slog, basically since then. And that's kind of the other reason I was like, the LeBron thing's good, but I'm like, I want to put myself back in that headspace. And so I am going to make it a goal to try to reinvigorate my relationship to doing this show. And that's another reason I wanted to go back and do this. One of these little retrospective things, and hopefully keep it up as a recurring bit, is I want to connect with you guys again a little bit more personally and have some more looseness, the fun of it, just manufacture it, even though there is a camera and I got to look good and I got my background and everything's different. I can generate that, and I will. But also it's the team, right? Listening back to that, it was just like delirium. It was punch drunk. We were all just confused, thrilled. Of course, we were coming out of the pandemic, and that is, of course, a part of it. But that team was just so fun and unexpected. It was found money. Every win felt like a shock, you know? Of course, that Game 6 against the Lakers was one of Book's best ever. The Chris Paul injury, plural, at that time, made that series even more of a whirlwind. And so it was nice to revisit. It was nice to kind of experience that again. Remind myself that this is fun. It is sports. It is basketball. Things that I allegedly love, but sometimes it's hard. And even if the team's not going to feel like that this year, most likely, hey, they could make the finals. I'm not counting it out. But at least early on, it's going to be, all right, what's going on here? Some trepidation. I'm recommitting to you guys and to myself that I'm going to make it fun to follow this team, to care about this team, to love this team, to cover this team. And we'll try to manufacture and recapture some of that energy, even if it's not going to be there organically. If LeBron can power through and still be the best player on the best team in the world 3.5 years after we thought he was done, I think we can get there too. That'll wrap us up. Hit follow, hit subscribe. We'll have a check-in with Steven Perjone Garner before the week is over. You'll want to catch that. We'll talk deep hoops as always with Steven. Catch up on me finally meeting Steven last weekend. Reminisce a little bit about all of that. Hit follow or subscribe to get that episode and more throughout the week and beyond, the month, the summer, and before long, the season. I'll talk to you guys then.